and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Well, we hope we're celebrating like that when the marriage decision comes down, because if you see that, well, you know, I should introduce myself first, because I'm Andy Hum.
And I'm Chris Cooper, in for Ann Northrup, who's on vacation.
And what show is this?
This is Gay USA.
Oh, well, we're frazzled, because if you are seeing this show, it's because the Supreme Court did not rule on same-sex marriage on Thursday. If they rule on Friday morning or on Monday, the analysis, you're going to have to wait for all our analysis next week. All right, but let's talk about the headlines that we have for this week, and there is a lot of other news as we wait for the Supreme Court to rule on same-sex marriage.
Well, first of all, Texas has denied co-adoption of the kids of two gay men who are married outside of Texas, and it is their biological twins, and they won't let them co-adopt.
Right. The sites of the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village have been declared a city landmark, and the park that's outside the Stonewall is on track to become a national park.
IBM has put the smackdown on anti-gay Louisiana governor and new presidential candidate on the Republican side, Bobby Jindal.
A Baltimore woman was lambasted by a neighbor for having a yard display deemed relentlessly gay.
And trans students in New York schools in the state are being relentlessly harassed, according to a new report.
Marvel Comics and the Sony movie outlet have conspired to keep Spider-Man in the movies white and non-gay.
We'll talk about that. I will also talk about FlameCon, which I went to, which was the first gay comic book convention on the East Coast.
Wow. The world's smallest country has legalized same-sex marriage. Could the United States be next?
Hundreds of thousands, unfortunately, rallied against same-sex marriage in Rome. We'll talk about that.
It was a big one. I'm going to review the gay-themed play Significant Other off-Broadway with Gideon Glick of Spring Awakening fame.
But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the big news of the week, which is the murders down in Charleston, South Carolina. And some of the intersections of how this is being perceived and how the right wing is talking about it and what it means for us, if anything, as gay people. But Andy, why don't you?
Well, I mean, it's left everybody speechless, utterly shocking. But it certainly, it certainly lifts the lid off the intense racism that is still rampant in this country. That is still, in many cases, socially acceptable.
But it hasn't left everyone speechless, because one of the things that's happened is that certainly two African-American conservatives have gone out of their way to try to spin this as not a race issue, but instead as an attack on Christians.
Or as Rick Perry would say, an accident. Remember that? So I mean, none of this is funny. This country has to look deep into its soul. I mean, you've been hearing about this all week, but I mean, as we are on the verge of celebrating all the kinds of wins we have in the gay community, we have to reflect on the fact that it's not over when you just get your legal rights, that there is a lot of work to do, both for the women's movement and the civil rights movement and all those things.
Well, and I think what we're seeing is, and this is where I was talking about the intersections, is the right wing, the conservatives, are lashing out as they see their privileged position, their special rights eroding, and society becoming more just and equal. And to them, it's baffling, it's scary. They feel like they're losing their country, which is exactly what the murderer, who I will not name because he doesn't deserve to be named, said when he went in and he killed eight innocent people.
It doesn't deserve to be named, but the police certainly treated him with gentleness when they arrested him. I haven't seen that happening with the arrest of African Americans over the last 2,000 years in this, or whatever.
The last 2 months.
Yes, exactly. exactly. I mean, it's just the contrast was. I'm not saying that this kid should have been beat up by the police. He's innocent until proven guilty in our system. But he drew deeply from right-wing websites and racist websites, including one that gave a lot of money to Republican candidates for president, who are now having to either give the money back or decide what they're going to do.
And another thing we learned about this person who allegedly committed this crime is he posed in a lot of photos with the Confederate flag. Now this, for those viewers who are not African American, you probably already know this, but the Confederate flag to a black person is like a Nazi flag to a Jew. Right. It is unbearable, intolerable. And the fact that we, for years, have had to walk by this symbol of our oppression and systematic degradation flying from in front of state houses as part of an official government display has galled us and sat in our craw and made our blood boil.
Especially if you know the history of this flag, yes, which is apparently the battle flag of Northern Virginia or something. It was not even the flag of the Confederacy per se. So that's what it was. It's not this heritage symbol. It's just a symbol of racism, and it was introduced into the culture when the Supreme Court started ordering desegregation of the United States. And then they started incorporating the stars and bars into their flags in many parts of the South. And I got a message from a viewer in the South this week saying, you're too intolerant of the South. Look, I'm going to talk about New York, okay, and tell you what all the problems here are too. We've all got problems, but this is and racism is not unique to the South. I mean, I live in a very segregated city. It's called New York. In many ways, a segregated city. So we've all got problems, but the Confederate flag has got to go. I mean, when my friends on Facebook started talking about, let's go down and chop it down. Let's go down and tear it down. I mean, and some people say, well, you can tear down the symbol, but you haven't really solved the problem of race. But tearing down the symbol is important.
Absolutely.
In Germany, Nazi insignia are illegal. And I'm not talking about making it illegal. And you are going to see a lot of people flying the flag from their front lawns.
And that's their business, and that way we'll know exactly who the racists are.
Exactly.
But in the meantime, the government should not be flying this flag. And what we are suddenly finding is all these corporations who for years had no issue with this flag, all of a sudden it's a problem. Walmart is pulling it from the stores. Amazon won't sell it anymore. All of a sudden it's a big issue. Where have they been for the last 50 years? So pardon my little bit of cynicism and anger over that. Sure. I'm glad it's happening, but it should have happened a long time ago. But to bring this back to Gay USA and why we're here, one of the interesting things to come out of this is the far right wing is trying to create this linkage between the Confederate flag coming down, because that sits in their craw so much. They're saying, oh, well then the rainbow flag, the symbol of anti-Christian bigotry and oppression, has to come down too. Well, Andy, what do you think of that?
Believe me, a lot of these right-wing Christian groups are starting to say that. We're under siege from the gay movement, and we need defending. As if, I mean, these are majority religions.
Well, and this comes back to the idea that they feel their privilege and their special rights slipping away, and it baffles them. They don't know what to do about it.
The American government does fly rainbow flags from its embassies in June. We've got a picture of the U.S. embassy in Britain. There it is, and they've got rainbow banners, and this is all over the world. They did it in Tel Aviv. They did it in cities all over the world, put rainbow flags up there. Interestingly, I read this week, now that they have a new majority conservative government in Britain, they are banning gay pride banners being flown from embassies, from British embassies. And U.S. embassies, in some cases, are the only outposts a lot of these gay people can go to for support and all those kinds of things when they, in their nations. The U.S. embassy has played a great role on that. And we should say, by the way, that Euro Pride is going on right now, and our special envoy, Jason Berry, is in Riga, in Latvia. And it's the first time they've ever had Euro Pride in former Soviet Republic.
Wow.
They had it in Poland once, but that was just part of the Warsaw Pact, so that's a little different. And then, it's funny that not funny, but the biggest racial story in the country before these horrible murders was the Rachel Dolezal story. And one of the things she did this week is come out as bisexual. And she said Caitlyn Jenner resonated with her. And she says that her whole thing in saying this is a white woman who said she was black, was that she engaged in creative nonfiction, not blackface. And she says that she's black based on her values and her lived experience.
Okay, so let's deal with this really quickly.
Okay, Chris.
Number one, there's a big deal, because I've had this conversation on Facebook and with people live for a while, people coming up to me and saying, well, if you can be transgendered, why can't you be transracial? And I just kind of rub my temples in pain. Look, being transgendered, it's a medical condition. Gender dysphoria is a medical condition. There's a biological basis for gender that you can go out and see in nature, and it's a much more fluid situation than our polar society leads you to believe.
I have said in all seriousness that we are all on a spectrum of gender.
Okay.
Transgender, from man to woman.
So,
all of us are on the spectrum.
So there's a biological basis for that. There is no biological basis really for race. Race is a social construct.
Right.
It's the series of experiences and perceptions that you have to deal with as a member of that race. And for someone who is not a member of that race to just sort of poach it and appropriate it, especially when she is from the majority culture that has been doing the oppressing, that's problematic, and it's horrible. Now, I wish her all the best. I hope she gets the psychological help she needs, because she clearly does. But I think that's all we really need to say about Rachel Dolezal.
Okay. And remembering the murder of a person of color 25 years ago, Julio Rivera, this was out in Queens 25 years ago, and they're going to have a vigil. He was murdered by skinheads who were out hunting for a homo to kill back then. So that's going to be commemorated with a candlelight vigil. This really catalyzed the movement in Queens County, New York, which was a very conservative county at the time. Now, probably the most diverse county on earth, I think.
Doesn't it send 2 openly gay city council members?
Yes, they do. Have 2 out, Danny Drum and Jimmy Van Bramer. So the candlelight vigil is going to be on July 1st, 6 to 7 p.m. on the corner of 37th Avenue and 78th Street. That and other things will be in our weekly program preview bulletin that we send out. If you want to subscribe to that, write to me at andyhum@aol.com. I will put you on there for that and other things that we're going to tell you about.
All right, shall we move down to Texas?
Sure.
All right, so in Texas, 2 gay men.
Now, same-sex marriage, not legal there.
Same-sex marriage is not legal there.
Unless the Supreme Court has come up with this decision.
There was a decision from the federal court lifting their ban, but it was stayed pending Supreme Court decision. You may know better than we do at this point. But anyway, 2 gay men who got married outside of Texas, Jason Hanna and Joe Riggs. They had kids through a surrogate mom. They had an egg donor who was different from the surrogate, and then the surrogate mom carried the eggs.
We got a picture of these guys.
And I'll keep talking as the picture comes up. The eggs were fertilized by the 2 guys, so one child is the son of one guy, and the other child is the son of the other guy. So they are biologically, one of them at least, is the biological father of one of the 2 kids. So they went before a judge, family court judge in Texas, and they said, okay, we know there's no same-sex marriage, so we want to establish our biological fatherhood, and we want to co-adopt each other's parents. And the judge said, nope,
and
can't do it.
Apparently, this is allowed to go on in Texas like this, county by county, because the rules are apparently unclear. This one was in Fort Worth, but it's insane. And by the way, even when they sort out same-sex marriage in this country, that's not going to clear up all these co-adoption rules and adoption rules for gay people.
Well, but if you're married, doesn't that mean that you will, by the fact that you're married to your partner, be the parent of that partner's child?
Not necessarily.
Well, sticking with these gentlemen for one more second, it's important to realize that they had genetic proof of their relationship to these kids, each one to one of the kids, and still the only person mentioned on the birth certificate is the surrogate mother.
Right. Now, what about the divorce case? The case where people wanted to divorce.
Well, okay, so there were a pair of there was a same-sex couple that wanted to divorce in Texas, and the Attorney General there, Greg Abbott, the Republican Governor Greg Abbott wanted to prevent their divorce in Austin. And in fact, the Austin judge granted the divorce and ruled that the state waited too long to intervene. So they kind of granted it on a technicality.
Yeah, you waited too long. But divorce is as important to us as marriage because it's a legal way to dissolve a relationship, and everybody can be treated fairly and all that kind of stuff.
Well, one of the reasons why we're fighting for all of these things is because it gives us the legal framework to make our lives more possible.
Right. Okay. Now, in the Congress of the United States of America, anti-gay Representative Paul Labrador from Idaho and Senator Mike Lee from Utah have introduced a bill to allow federal employees and contractors to sue if they are stopped from discriminating against gay married couples, if they are acting on their religious beliefs. And this would mean that they could refuse to process joint tax returns. They could refuse to process Social Security checks, etc. I mean, where do these people stop?
Well, apparently they've introduced this before in the 113th Congress, which I guess was the last one, under the name the Marriage and Religious Freedom Act. This isn't going anywhere, I don't think. But
let's hope not.
Yeah.
Now, Jeb Bush, we have one thing to be grateful to him for. If he's successful, he's going to keep Gay USA in business for a long time because he told religious conservatives that the debate should continue on same-sex marriage no matter what the Supreme Court says. And, I mean, they're not giving up.
Well, meanwhile, Bobby Jindal, the governor of Louisiana and also a Republican candidate for the presidency, when the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, similar to Indiana's in Louisiana, got shut down by their legislature because they saw the fallout in Indiana, they're like, we want no part of that. Bobby Jindal, because he was planning to run for president, went ahead and issued an executive order basically instituting the same thing.
Right.
Because he wanted to burnish his bona fides with his base. Well, IBM didn't like that. IBM had pushed really hard for the legislature to drop their RFRA. And so IBM had a long scheduled opening of a new plant out in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. There was a scheduled ribbon cutting with Bobby Jindal supposed to be there. And IBM just said, nope, we're not doing it. We're canceling the ribbon cutting ceremony.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like they're closing. Doesn't sound like they're closing the National Service Center, but they don't want to give them a place in the sun, and it is anti-business to be anti-gay, basically.
And this is, I would say, this is a significant snub.
Yes, of course. Bobby Jindal is the one who a couple of years ago said, "We have to stop being the stupid party," meaning his Republican Party, and then he has proceeded to do some of the most boneheaded, bigoted things that you can imagine. Yep. I mean, get with the program.
Well, meanwhile, next door in Texas, back to Texas for a second, they've started a new effort called Texas Wins, a campaign, multi-year, multi-million-dollar effort to increase the number of LGBT Texans protected by anti-discrimination laws.
Great.
It's sort of in tandem with another effort they have called, I'm going to lose it, I can't find it. But anyway, it's got endorsements from celebrities including Mark Cuban and Willie Nelson. So hopefully they will be able to make progress city by city in Texas because the likelihood of them making statewide progress is kind of limited right now.
But Chris, not everyone is getting the message. An oil executive was driving his car and he brushed up against this gay couple and they said, "Hey, watch it." And he goes, "F you, faggots." That's, and like that. So they exchanged words. He didn't like this. So he gets out of the car and he clocks them. And this guy's name, we should tell you his name, Anthony Ferra, F-E-R-A, is president of Houston's Midstar Energy. He is charged with assault against Andy Smith and Paul Von Wupperfield, who are a married couple. And, you can't go around hitting people that you don't like.
Unbelievable. Well, meanwhile, let's get through some more same-sex marriage stuff.
Sure.
very quickly, America is embracing same-sex marriage. We all knew that. We actually now have some statistics to go with it.
Really?
Really?
How are we doing?
According to a new report, support is rising 2.6% per year on average in all 50 states, and 6.2% between 2012 and 2014 alone. Even in Alabama, there's an estimated 37% rate of public support for marriage equality.
And when they voted on same-sex marriage there, it was like 81% that were against it, weren't there?
So there's progress.
Well, there is also a terrible story from Alabama, from George County. Now, this happened back in April. We have a picture of Mercedes Williamson, 17. Her body was discovered, unearthed, and at first we didn't know this was a transgender murder because they misgendered the person in the reports and things like that. This is the 9th transgender woman murdered in the United States this year. She was buried there on May 30th. Josh Brandon Vallum, 28, has been charged, and it's unclear about the motive.
And for some context, I believe in all of 2014, there were 12 transgender murders nationwide. So we're already up to 9, and we're only halfway through the year. So this is not a good trend.
I guess I should then talk about what the report from the New York Civil Liberties Union, just to show that I'm not picking on Alabama and Texas and places like that. The New York Civil Liberties Union did a report on the pervasive discrimination versus transgender and gender non-conforming students across New York State. As young as 5, they say, they face relentless harassment in their classes. Despite the passage of the Dignity for All Students Act 5 years ago, teachers are given little or no guidance on how to set up a gender-inclusive learning environment, and most transgender students take the course of either dropping out of school or being asked to leave in some cases because of who they are. So this is New York. You can read this report at nyclu.org, and this is New York, folks, where we're supposed to be doing better, and we're not.
No, I think what it shows is that passing a law is only a first step. You've got to have the cultural shift to go with it.
Yes. Like we passed this Constitution in the United States, but we also have to enforce it.
And we've got to fight for it all the time.
And we're not enforcing it in New York State because the governor, the budget just came out, and the governor, he wanted a tax credit, a big tax credit for private and religious schools, and he didn't get it. They didn't vote for it. So he just transferred $250 million in the budget directly to the schools for purposes that he says are okay, you can get away with this. But I didn't realize, the New York Times pointed this out, we have something in the New York Constitution which says you cannot directly or indirectly support religious institutions with state funding. And that's what they're doing.
So could someone, and I would imagine it would have to be a parent with a kid in the schools, sue on that basis?
You should sue if you're in the public schools because you're getting starved by the governor. They don't even have phys ed in most of the schools in New York City. They don't have a lot of programs that they need. They have overcrowding in the schools, and he's taken $250 million and giving it away to private and religious schools. Governor Cuomo. Now, he's supposed to be a liberal.
All right. Well, Andy, let's get to big news.
I just want to say in the New York City budget, because I've been telling you about how they wanted to spend $50 million on private and religious schools to have safety officers. Again, a big giveaway of our money to anti-gay schools. They didn't do that in the budget, but the big sponsors of this, most of them Orthodox Jewish, by the way, and Protestant fundamentalists and Catholic, they are going to push for it anyway going forward. So be on the lookout.
Well, also here in New York City, Andy was at a momentous occasion. Andy, you want to tell us about that?
Well, you could call it that. We've told you that this was coming because it was coming. The New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission has never designated a gay landmark, LGBT landmark, ever, for historic reasons. They mostly designate buildings based on architectural reasons, but they have the option of doing it for cultural reasons and historic reasons, and they did it with the Stonewall Inn, or what was the site of the Stonewall Inn. There is a Stonewall bar there, but that's not the original, at 5153 Christopher Street. Many of you have been there. It's a place that people come to when they come to New York. It's almost like a shrine. I mean, Corey Johnson testified when he was 17. He's the city council member here who's gay. When he was 17, he came to New York and stood outside there in wonder, and it's a potent thing. But so that was a big deal. Nobody testified against it. I mean, we used to go to hearings on gay and AIDS issues, and we'd have the religious rights screaming at us and all that kind of stuff. No one testified against this designation, and no one voted against it on the Landmarks Commission.
Impressive.
So that's quite a breakthrough. And what that means is the facade of the building will stay the way it is. It doesn't have anything to do with the interior.
Now, it had already been designated, if I remember correctly, a federal historic
National
site.
Register of Historic Places, many New York State Register of Historic Places, all this kind of stuff.
But this is an added level of protection, right?
Those things did not protect it from being altered or torn down. And the windows are unique to that era, where the windows would be kind of small because you didn't want to see in, people didn't want to be able to see into the bar and all that kind of stuff. It was a kind of a secretive kind of a place. I mean, it could have been replaced with a big plate glass window and been made into a Marc Jacobs, retail outlet. Jay Shockley, who worked on the Landmarks Preservation Commission to make this happen in the old days, said that's what he was worried about. So now it's going to stay the way it is, the way it looked in 1969. Now, there's something called the National Parks Conservation Association, a private group, been around for 97 years. They advocate for national parks, for more funding for national parks and for new national parks. And their big campaign is to make Christopher Park, which is right across the street from the Stonewall, and that's where the rebellion took place, outside the Stonewall mostly, that they want to make that a national park. It's pretty small. I mean,
it's a little wedge of a triangle. It's really small.
But in order to do that, it has to be designated. It has to be, the city owns the park. They have to give it to the federal government. The federal government has to own it. Then President Obama can step in and he can declare it a national monument, like the Grand Canyon. That's his power under the Antiquities Act. Congress can do this too. We're not expecting anything nice from this Congress under the current regime. So they want to get this done before Obama leaves office.
I think if the federal government gave us Governor's Island, we can at the very least give them that little wedge, in front of the Stonewall.
Yeah. Why not?
I think so.
Why not? So that's in process. It has to go before the local community board. It's a neighborhood issue. It is going before the community board on July 1st, community board 2, and before their Parks Commission, and it's in process to happen.
Well, while we're on the subject of nice things happening here in New York City, one of the nice things that will be happening for Gay Pride is that there's a bike share program in the city called City Bikes, where if you join the program, you can take a bike from one location, ride it to someplace else, and leave the bike there. And the bikes are maintained for you and all that stuff. So the City Bike program is having rainbow versions of the bicycles rolled out in time for Pride, and they're setting up docking stations for the bicycles along the Pride route, specifically so that people can get to and from the festivities on Gay Pride Day.
And if you ride them all the way to Seattle, you will see that Mayor Ed Murray, the out-gay mayor, has painted many of the crosswalks rainbow.
And if you manage to ride one onto a steamer ship crossing the Atlantic, you'll be able to get to London, where you'll see that they've painted an entire commuter train rainbow-colored for Pride.
We have to thank Gilbert Baker for inventing the rainbow flag in the late 1970s. And as we've pointed out, it's the first flag that's been accepted to the Museum of Modern Art as a flag, the rainbow flag.
Yep.
Congratulations, Gilbert.
Fantastic.
All right, some other good news.
Well, shall we talk about the relentlessly gay yard in Baltimore? Or?
Sure. Well, actually, sure, if you'd like to. Yeah, why not? Go ahead.
All right. Well, in Baltimore, a woman had a nice backyard. Her name was Julie Baker. Actually, I'm not sure if it was the backyard or the front yard, but she had a nice yard. And she set up a string of mason jars.
There you see them.
Filled with rainbow colors and the words love and ohana, which is apparently Hawaiian for family.
Isn't that nice?
Yes.
But her neighbor didn't like it.
No. Her neighbor sent her a letter that said, quote, "Your yard is becoming relentlessly gay.
Relentlessly gay.
Myself and others in the neighborhood ask that you tone it down. This is a Christian area, and there are children. Keep it up, and I will be forced to call the police on you. Your kind need to have respect for God.
Yes, it is. So she started raising money. A friend of hers started raising money so that she could put more rainbows out there. And she says, I will not relent to hatred. And she's a widowed mother of 4 herself. Yeah. She wasn't trying to make a big, relentlessly gay statement, but she says, certainly symbolizes that to a lot of us, and we appreciate it.
She says, instead, I will battle hatred with whimsy and beauty and laughter and love wrapped around my home, yard, and family. You go, girl.
Well, the Boy Scouts Council in Philadelphia wants to show us some more love. They have 500 troops in the area, and they say they are totally ready to welcome gay men into leadership once they lift the ban on gay scout leaders. This is the Cradle of Liberty Council. They say they'd wanted to, but they'd been prevented by the policy. But a leader said, I don't want anybody promoting a gay or straight agenda, whatever the hell that is.
I'm fascinated by this story, Andy, because this is the same council that was in a pitched battle with the city of Philadelphia because they had a sweetheart deal. Back it up a little bit.
For a building.
For a building. Back it up a little bit. The Supreme Court decided that the Boy Scouts of America could keep gay men and lesbians out of their organization.
You can choose who you want in your own group. This is America.
None of us were necessarily pleased with what they were doing, but being liberal people, we thought this was a fair decision if governments were allowed to therefore say, all right, you want to discriminate? We have an anti-discrimination policy. You can't get any more sweetheart deals from our municipality, which is what Philadelphia said. They said, you've had for decades use of this building for free. We're not going to let you have that anymore. You're going to have to pay market rate, or you're going to have to change your discrimination policy so that you're serving all the people of Philadelphia, or you're going to have to vacate. And because they said, we will not subsidize your discrimination. That went to the federal courts, and the federal courts actually ruled in favor of the Boy Scouts on that. They actually ruled against Philadelphia in a decision I will never be able to understand. Right. So it's really fascinating to now see, only a few years later, that same council is embracing adult scout leaders who are openly gay. So, I guess you can call it progress.
Go ahead and discriminate, if you're a private religious organization, but don't ask for our money. Yep. If you take our money, you've got to abide by civil laws. All right. Maybe we should get into what's going on with Spider-Man and maybe hear about FlameCon. So, first of all, it emerged this week under the WikiLeaks memos that Sony and Marvel Comics had entered into an agreement that Spider-Man must always be white and must never be gay. I mean, come on, Hollywood liberals.
Okay, full disclosure, I worked at Marvel Comics for many, many years in the early through the mid-90s, a huge Marvel Comics fan. And this does not surprise me in the slightest for several reasons. Number one, these corporations are always trying to protect their brand, their properties, and maintain a consistent whatever and control the image. So this doesn't surprise me. There was a clause in that memo. I don't know if you noticed it. It said that if the comic books changed the sexual orientation or the race of Spider-Man, then the hands of the studio were untied on that issue. And in fact, what is happening in the comics, supposedly, this is rumored, it seems likely, the Spider-Man will in fact become biracial. There is an existing Spider-Man character.
We have a picture of him.
It's from the ultimate version of the Marvel Universe. I don't want to get too comic book geeky for you here.
This is Miles Morales.
He's half black, half Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
And he's been around in the Marvel Universe for a while, but in a sort of parallel Marvel Universe where they did all sorts of experimental things, like have a biracial Spider-Man. So what's happening?
In the parallel universe, Peter Parker, who was Spider-Man, was murdered.
Right.
And so this guy becomes Spider-Man?
That's my understanding.
Was he bitten by a spider, or was he bitten by Peter Parker?
This is after my time. I haven't followed that closely. But the bottom line is that Marvel is doing one of those crazy comic book things where the two universes are smushing together. And so all these changes are going to be happening in some of their iconic characters. And supposedly the rumor is that Miles Morales will become the new Spider-Man and Peter Parker will become his sort of senior mentor.
Okay.
So anyway, the bottom line with all of this is that comics are finally catching up to the modern world because, you know, you think about all these iconic characters that were created, some of them in the 30s and 40s, some of them in the 60s, before people were really conscious of the fact that, hey, they shouldn't all be blonde, blue-eyed white guys. Some of the heroes should be women. Oh, look, there are actually black people. Some of them are Muslims. There are some Puerto Ricans. There are Asians. So now, finally, comics are starting to catch up to the diversity of the country, of the world, and we're seeing it sort of retroactively added to the continuity of certain characters.
But just don't take Santa Claus because you'll upset Fox News very much, where they once declared that Santa Claus was white. Santa Claus was a fictional character.
Well, part of that whole more openness was reflected in FlameCon, which I know you guys mentioned briefly last week.
Tell us about, what is FlameCon?
FlameCon, I went to it.
And you went?
I went to FlameCon because I'm a geek. Full disclosure, I'm a geek. Went to FlameCon, which was organized by an organization called Geeks Out. It is a gay and lesbian geek organization for all that stuff like comic books and video games that's sort of exploded lately in the popular culture. And this was the first ever comic book convention, specifically gay, lesbian, trans, in the East Coast, and it was packed.
What goes on there?
Well, there's lots of panels where people discuss, for example, there was a panel about ultra-violence in gay and lesbian-themed comic books, because some of them are really violent.
Are we getting back at people who've been harming us over the years?
Some of them do that. Some
like
of them
a
are
Quentin
about that.
Tarantino movie.
Yeah, some of them are like that. There were, of course, there's costumes, lots of incredible costumes.
We like to dress up.
We like to dress up.
Did you dress up?
I did not dress up, though I was kind of regretting it because I ran into these two black guys who looked great, who had dressed as male versions of Storm, the X-Man who controls the weather, and they looked great. I was like, oh, I should have done Storm. But no, I was not dressed up. But it was a lot of fun. But what it showed was the hunger in our community for an access to the geek culture. It's always been there.
And it's fantasy.
It's fantasy, it's science fiction, it's comic books, and that's, I think, especially important to us because we came up in a world that didn't necessarily include us. We've always been outsiders, and these fantasies were our outlet, maybe more than most other people.
Well, I mean, you know, I talked to endless people of gay men of my generation, you know, who fell in love with Batman, for instance, or Superman, and cite this, reading these comic books as a kid, as the recognition that they were homosexual.
Right here, I'm one of them, and quite apart from that, there's the gay subtext of like Batman and Robin.
And lesbians get Wonder Woman.
Lesbians get Wonder Woman. That whole island that she comes from, that's only women. I mean, come on.
Or as Anne would say, Black Beauty also.
Novel. And then if you look at X-Men, I mean, X-Men is the ultimate parable for the gay experience. A bunch of people who are born different than the others, and then suddenly at adolescence, they realize that there's something inside them that's different, that makes them special. And yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons to be.
Revenge of the Nerds.
There's all sorts of reasons to be a gay nerd, and now we have a convention for it. So it was a huge success, big turnout. They're going to need a bigger venue next year.
When I worked at the Hedrick Martin Institute with gay youth, we would have movie day and things. One of the most popular movies was Revenge of the Nerds, because it was just about outsiders, and the kids related to that very, very much.
All right.
All right, what else is going on? Well, okay, a couple of other things from around the country. Michigan, a lot of anti-gay bills were introduced from the far right. These aren't going anywhere. Marriages can only be performed by ministers, and only opposite-sex couples can be married in secret. I don't know what that means. Loretta Lynch, our new Attorney General, spoke at a Lambda Legal Defense reception in Washington and said that there has been a national awakening on LGBT rights, the Great Awakening.
The Navy is looking to require a high-level review before they separate transgender troops. That's already been done by the Air Force and the Army, so it's nice to see another one of the services getting on board.
Kansas City, Missouri has the first out council member elected. This is Julie Justice, J-U-S-T-U-S, who is a former state senator there in Missouri.
And more trans news at my alma mater, Harvard. A man named Skylar Baylor will be the first openly trans collegiate swimmer in U.S. history. He was recruited, he's 19, he was recruited for the women's swim team before his transition. Now that he's transitioned, he'll be swimming on the men's team.
Good swimmer?
I have no clue. Better than me, I can tell you that.
Yes, yes, we are trying to deal with these issues at younger ages. In San Francisco, the Ruth Asawa School of the Arts is said to be the first to offer LGBT studies. Cleve Jones, who a great activist out there, who did the quilt, among other things, in his long career as an activist, worked with Harvey Milk. He's a consultant on the curriculum. And they're going to go back to ancient times in doing this curriculum. 28% of the students at this school identify as LGBT.
Good Lord.
This is going to be an elective, but I have to say, it's not the first. The Harvey Milk School, which was founded in 1985 by Steve Ashkenazi at the Hedrick Martin Institute, has been teaching gay studies forever there and giving the kids a sense of their history. Let's stay in California. You heard about the Sodomite Suppression Act, which is to basically put all gay people to death. And this was supposed to be put on the ballot. And the Attorney General, Kamala Harris, said, I don't want to do this. This is just too out there. I don't want to. And a judge has let her not put it on the ballot, not qualify for signatures.
The judge said it would be inappropriate, a waste of public resources. It would generate unnecessary divisions among the public and tend to mislead the electorate. However, what was spawned out of the Sodomite Suppression Act, the Intolerant Jackass Act, which was introduced
That's literally what it's called.
That is literally what it's called, which was introduced by a legislator out in California in response to the Sodomite Suppression Act. What would it do? Go ahead. It would force the man who introduced the Sodomite Suppression Act to go to sensitivity training.
Just him. A statewide referendum just to help this guy.
I'm pretty sure. I think it also involves some sort of fine. But yeah, that's basically what it's about.
The anti-transgender initiative out there is going forward, which would say that you must use the toilet of your legal gender in government buildings. The government must monitor who's using the restrooms. God bless it. So obsessed with this nonsense. I hope we can stop that one from getting on there too.
Well, and finally, not far away in Utah, State Senator Jim DeBacchus, who is the only openly gay state senator there, says he has some inside information, unsourced, that the Utah Attorney General plans to is already laying the groundwork to stop same-sex marriages in that state, and he's just waiting for the SCOTUS decision to come down his way.
I assume most of the states that banned same-sex marriage before, most of them, not all of them, will want to revert to their policy of banning it. But you'll know more when the Supreme Court rules.
All right.
All right. International news.
International.
So, I want to start, there was a big rally in Australia, in Canberra, for same-sex marriage. Can we show that? I like the sign that they put up there in Canberra. The sign the person was holding, if you can find that sign at the rally in Canberra. I'm bored with gayrage. They call it, gay marriage is called gayrage there. I'm bored with gayrage rallies. Get it done now. Get it done, Australia.
Excellent.
There's resistance. The speakers there included Samantha and Haley Wilson, who were married when it was legal in the Australian Capital Territory in 2013 briefly, and unmarried by the High Court. And they said being unmarried left them mortified and gutted.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The thinking is that this would pass if they allowed a free vote?
A conscience vote. The reason conservative governments in Australia and Germany are not allowing these votes is because they're in coalition with other right-wing partners, or in the case of Australia, the Liberal Party, which is the party in power, and it is a conservative party. It's called the Liberal Party. They worry that they would lose 5 senators if they allowed a conscience vote on that.
So just to make it clear, we're talking parliamentary system here, which works a lot differently than ours here in the States.
Yes.
And so it's all about coalitions. And
well, in Australia, they are a majority party, but in Germany they're not, and in Israel they're not, and I'm not a fan of the Likud government, but they have allowed some pro-gay things to happen, but they wouldn't allow a gay rights bill to go through.
Well, normally under the parliamentary system, just to make sure everybody understands, when there's a vote, everyone has to vote according to what their leaders say, unless they get permission to vote as they want, vote their conscience, which is what a free vote would be. So that's where Australia stands. Right. Meanwhile, in Rome, bad news. Hundreds of thousands turned out, a lot of them from France apparently, with because there were a lot of signs for Manif pour tout, which is the organization that fought vociferously and is still fighting against same-sex marriage in France. But hundreds of thousands showed up in Rome, flooding their square there, the central square in Rome, which can hold an estimated 300,000 people, and it was overflowing.
And the Prime Minister there, Renzi, he is pushing a civil unions bill. It's not even same-sex marriage. And they're also protesting the teaching of gender theory in schools. But a poll in Italy says that 51% support same-sex marriage. So.
Yeah, and as you said, this is not even for marriage, but apparently the influence of the Catholic Church, which of course is situated right smack in the middle of them, is pretty heavy on these legislators.
An encouraging note from the island of Jamaica, which is a tough place for...
We'll take what we can get from Jamaica.
For gay people. We've got a picture of him. An Anglican priest, in the wake of the visit by the U.S. gay envoy, Randy Berry, Reverend Sean Major Campbell, he's the guy, the man on the right, he spoke out for sexuality as a justice issue, and he lamented that the, what is that word? Oh, the taboo around gender and LGBT issues in Jamaica. And he called for a massive education campaign. And the woman in that picture has been very involved with a lot of trying to educate people about that. Her name is Yvonne Sobers.
Meanwhile, on another island, Pitcairn Island, population 48, they've just...
You heard that correctly, folks.
It is...
smallest population in the world.
Yes, it's considered...
For a country.
Exactly. Considered by many to be the smallest by population. They just legalized same-sex marriage. Not just, actually. It happened a couple of months ago, but nobody noticed.
Well, it's a British overseas territory off the coast of New Zealand, and the residents there are descended from the mutineers of the Bounty. You remember Mutiny on the Bounty. There haven't been any weddings, right?
Nobody's lined up for it, so... But
now, small countries, maybe Vatican City could be next.
Moving on. Meanwhile, in Mexico, another state, and in Mexico, same-sex marriage has been legalized state by state. Another state, Tamaulipas, has legalized same-sex marriage. You don't have to go through a whole injunction process and sue or anything. You can just get married
And the state of Colima. I mean, I don't know why they don't just get this all done. The Supreme Court's already ruled that you essentially have to get rid of these discriminatory laws. But it's going on a case-by-case basis.
It's got to be case-by-case until a certain critical mass is reached in each state. So one more state falls in Mexico, which is good
In Morocco,
news.
20 were arrested for homosexuality, and also a judgment is due in the case of the two men who were arrested in a gay rights demonstration there. So there's a crackdown going on in Morocco, which used to be a big gay destination. And
there's a crackdown going on in Malaysia, despite the fact that there had previously been a ruling in Malaysia against their anti-cross-dressing laws, that those laws were unconstitutional. There's been no enforcement. In fact, enforcement has been suspended in certain areas, the heavily Muslim areas, because Malaysia is a heavily Muslim country. And so there's been a rash of convictions and arrests. 9 trans women were just convicted of illegal cross-dressing. And the HRW, Human Rights Watch, excuse me, there we go, called the incident a pattern of arbitrary arrest and harassment of transgender women in Malaysia. So, unfortunately, that continues.
And discrimination continues in Russia. In Moscow, the New Drama Theater planned to do a production of Gross Indecency, The 3 Trials of Oscar Wilde by Moises Kaufman, who's been on this show. The Russian government barred the company from accepting foreign funds for artistic productions. So it's been indefinitely postponed. And Kaufman said it's obvious it was banned because of the subject matter, which he called incredibly relevant to what's going on in Russia today and could have led to discourse, but they don't want to talk about it. All right. In Northern Ireland, a couple is seeking judicial review of their right to marry because Northern Ireland is the only part of the United Kingdom that doesn't have same-sex marriage. In Australia, going back there for a second, the Bishop of Sydney wrote to those 150 corporations supporting same-sex marriage and said, I have grave concern about your support for this. Grave concern. I have grave concern for your opposition to it. And the Pope is reconvening the bishops from around the world in October on the family issues, but the preliminary document that they're offering is offering no hope to LGBT Catholic groups, and he just told trans people to accept the body they're born in as God's gift.
AIDS news?
Yes.
All right, AIDS news. Well, I'll start off with Broadway Bears. That happened this past Sunday. It's the annual fundraiser for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS.
One of the many annual fundraisers for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS.
Well,
yes.
this one involves people taking their clothes off.
Yes, it does.
And it's
a lot of fun.
It's been going on for 25 years. I had never been before. This was my first time, and it was a blast. The energy level in that room is off the charts.
Harvey Fierstein played a big role in this time, didn't he?
Harvey Fierstein, was a small cameo for Harvey Fierstein, and Laverne Cox had a small little role. Judith Light came out at the end.
Judith Light, who is our angel, who has been speaking up on AIDS forever.
Anyway, this is the program for it. It's sexy as heck, and that's one of the things that's fun about it, is that they are very sex positive. They're like, sex is fun,
Imagine
and
that.
let's celebrate it.
With all this marriage talk, there's something that's totally sex. Well, marriage can be sex positive as well, of course.
Anyway, just so you don't think this is too New York centric, you can actually see all 25 years worth of Broadway Bears. They sell the DVDs online. You can
we don't promote selling anything on the show.
I know. But I'm just saying you can go look for it if
you want to look for free at the video highlights of this production, write to me at andyhum@aol.com. Go to the Broadway Cares website if you like. We run that at the end of the show anyway. But if you're on our email list, you will get the link to this actual highlight video. Now, the other big video that's coming out on Monday on HBO is Larry Kramer in Love and Anger, the documentary, and we do have the trailer from that show. If we can.
We have to start being powerful, or we are going to die. It is up to us right now.
When you have a health emergency, you tell the world and you do something about it.
Nobody is in charge.
Larry plunked down a typewriter and began to write The Normal Heart.
It is a story of one person who said no, and that's how you start a movement.
I wanted it to be based on anger.
There's medicine before Larry Kramer, and then there's medicine after Larry Kramer.
I am alive today because of him.
We're no longer effeminate drag queens or whatever they put on television, and that image changed overnight.
Well, I mean, it is full of anger and passion. You're not going to agree with everything that's said in the movie, but it certainly reminded me of a lot of proud memories of the movement in those days, and a lot of pain of what we went through. And because we lost almost everybody to AIDS before 1995, as ACT UP was pushing to try to get the drugs online, and it took until 1995, 96 to do that. So if you want to revisit these old days, check out that film on HBO.
June 29th?
June 29th is the premiere. It'll be repeated, I'm sure.
And I also wanted to mention something that Andy and Ann mentioned last week, which is Limited Partnership, the documentary about the two gay men who got married back in the 1970s in Colorado through a loophole, and their struggle and their fight to stay together because one of them was Australian. So there was the whole Immigration Naturalization Service issue.
Tony and Richard.
And through the lens of their struggle, you see the whole progress of the fight for same-sex marriage. It can be seen online for free. You just have to go to video.pbs.org. And you can see it's about an hour long.
Yes.
And you can see the whole documentary. So that's definitely.
It's excellent. I was quite moved by it. And you can read Chris Cooper's reviews of that and other movies at cfcooper.net.
There you go.
And by the way, I read this week about an old incident that happened where Franklin Roosevelt was involved in a anti-gay witch hunt in Newport, Rhode Island, when he was Assistant Secretary of the Navy going against gay sailors. And he led this fight. Franklin Roosevelt, one of my heroes in many ways. And I posted this on Facebook. There was an article about it, and Tony Speciale, who was a theater director and puts together shows, and they did one on the Harvard secret court that purged gays in the 1920s. They're working on a play about this.
Oh, wow.
So that should be very interesting.
Something to look forward to.
Yes.
Well, we seem to have segged into entertainment news.
Yes,
Okay,
we
so
have.
One more note I have on entertainment news, which is that there's going to be stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for Harvey Fierstein.
Firestein.
Sorry,
It's all
Fierstein. And Cyndi Lauper, who is an ally, not gay, but she's also the founder of the True Colors Foundation, which is big on helping gay youth. And so congratulations to both of them. The
Congratulations, Harvey.
The
you
winners
deserve it.
The winners were announced by openly gay jazz great Dave Koz.
Wow. Also on PBS was Out in the Night, about young black lesbians who fought back when they were being attacked in the village and ended up getting arrested themselves. I haven't seen it yet. It's on my DVR, but that's also at PBS's POV series.
And I think that's also available at video.pbs.org.
And I saw another gay play this week. Now, all playbills have the rainbow on top in New York because it's Pride Month. It's unbelievable.
Gay.
But this play is called Significant Other by Joshua Harmon. He's the new hot playwright. He wrote something called Bad Jews that got tremendous reviews last year. So this is about a gay, we have a picture. This is about a gay 29-year-old, Gideon Glick, played by Gideon Glick, who can't find love, and he can't find love, but his girlfriends from college, they are getting married off and all that kind of stuff, and he's left alone. And that's kind of what the play is about. And it is very well written for what it is, but it takes place sort of in a vacuum where no outside issues intrude. I mean, nothing that's happening in the world, they don't care about anything but themselves, basically. And it's like, I was kind of put off by that because, I mean, why should we care about them if they don't care about anything but their own little dramas and their lives? And also, this kid can't get a date. He only has to do is go out, and I think he would. Maybe he's being unrealistic about things. And I think in earlier times it was so sad that we might have protested this thing. But you're allowed to have these visions now. We're not going to protest. I just was disappointed in it from that point of view.
Well, Andy, we have a few minutes. What is your prognostication on the Supreme Court?
Oh, if I say it here, they're going to, I've been saying all along that I think it's going to be a 5-4 decision for us. I can't believe that the court would reverse themselves on what they've been doing, which is to allow same-sex marriage to go into effect in 37 states without stepping in. They could have stepped in a long time ago and done that. But I mean, again, by the time people see this, they're going to know what happened.
Well, I would just say that no matter what happens, not to get yourself tied up in too many knots, because we will win this with or without Supreme Court. It is inevitable. Same-sex marriage is coming to all 50 states. We may have to fight that much harder to make it happen if we don't win in the Supreme Court. Either way, we have work to do. And we talked about how laws don't change things without the cultural shift to go with it. We've made tremendous cultural shift. I mean, we've talked about that during this whole program. But I think no matter what happens, we have work to do. But we will win this no matter what.
I know you're all waiting to exhale and you're waiting to celebrate, but there is always going to be work to be done. And we have to keep it up, otherwise we will go back.
And we'll be back next week.
Thank you, Chris, for being here. Happy Pride, everybody.
Happy Pride, always a pleasure.